favorite person in the world. And the reason he's my favorite is he makes Chocolate Bliss. Not just to drink, but he actually makes the Chocolate Bliss superfood powder mix. So we're here in Austin visiting with David, and in honor of
in my office,
in his office with all his book friends behind us, and in honor of many of our customers who have diabetes, we've assembled a series of questions.
Cool.
And we've organized those questions according to your current diabetes program that you suggest.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So we're just going to
Hopefully I can remember what that is.
Right. Well, that's okay. I'll read it off.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay. So we'll go rapid fire.
Go for it. Just
fair.
rock on.
All right.
We'll run
So
fast.
the first thing you suggest for someone with diabetes is to drink a gallon of Bliss throughout a day with enzymes with and between drinks, and then to check your sugar throughout the day to kind of see what that impact is of the enzymes in the Bliss. So you can kind of measure how you're going. And one of our questions related to that is, right now, our recipe for Chocolate Bliss is to use Vanilla Agave Nectar to sweeten it. What if they're still having a sugar spike from the agave, even though it's a low glycemic sweetener?
Sure.
Do we use other sweeteners? What do you suggest?
Well, just one little slight refinement of what the starting point was, like a gallon a day. That's a lot of Chocolate Bliss.
For when you're starting out, especially.
Yeah. What I tell people, the real way to really do it is to drink an equal amount of water. Like if you're going to drink 8 ounces of Chocolate Bliss, drink 8 ounces of water, then wait a few minutes, 8 ounces of Chocolate Bliss, then a few minutes later, 8 ounces of water.
Okay.
So you've bracketed. So really the big upgrade for people with diabetes is most of people that have diabetes are chronically dehydrated. And I imagine that's one of the reasons that people have such a great effect with Chocolate Bliss is because they're actually increasing their hydration.
Right.
So the first thing, I drink probably 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons of water every day, and then maybe 1 liter or 2 liters of Chocolate Bliss, plus all the produce I eat's high water content, like tomatoes, avocados, greens, things like that. So
so water, then Chocolate Bliss, then water, and enzymes.
Enzymes with Chocolate Bliss and in between is great. Yeah.
And if they're doing all that and they're still having a sugar spike with the Vanilla Agave Nectar, do they continue on? Do they switch to a different sweetener?
I've yet to have anybody have that happen. If they're drinking water, sometimes if they're drinking, too much Chocolate Bliss, like I've seen some people, I was in a workshop over the weekend where people were for the first time drinking Chocolate Bliss as a primary food all during the day.
Right.
And they were having some interesting special effects. And my rule of thumb is to arrange my experience so that special effects are minimized.
Special effects like pooping.
Well, pooping, detoxing, headaches, heart palpitations, which is rare.
From not having had water before and after, or just too much too fast?
Yeah, too much too fast. Because water is your friend. Because the only time anybody ever has any detox symptoms is because there's too much coming out of their tissues to be alkalized or balanced pH-wise by their fluids. And also the minerals that are in solution in the fluids.
Right.
So best rule of thumb is if you drink a bunch of water and some Chocolate Bliss with it, then the minerals in the Chocolate Bliss will saturate or will go into solution in whatever fluid is there, and it'll all be good.
Cool. Yeah. Have you ever done Chocolate Bliss with any other sweeteners?
I have. I've tried a whole bunch of different sweeteners, and all of them create weird effects with me. Like a sizable, I'd call it a majority of people that live on superfoods, for example, will notice that if they use stevia, they'll get the 5 to 7 hertz Parkinson's shakes after a while. And Yacone to me gives me kind of a fungusy feeling. At least the ones I've tried. Maybe there's other ones.
Yacone syrup,
Yacone
powder.
Yeah. Yacone syrup, I have other than tried the powder.
Okay.
Same way with xylitol, independent
kind of a fungusy.
Well, xylitol, I get, it's like my consciousness gets attenuated.
Okay.
So what I look for is my consciousness being sharpened or attenuated. And my days are too busy to be any type of attenuation. Anything that attenuates my consciousness is out for me. Okay. Now that may be different for you. I mean, you just have to start off with your outcome, and that's really important. Is first off, you have to figure out what your outcome is, what you desire. If your outcome is special effects, then you probably aren't going to eat our products.
Or you want the special effects of detox, and so you drink lots of Chocolate Bliss really
with
fast
no water.
and with no water.
Yeah, so my suggestion is you figure out what your desired outcome is, state it clearly, and then do experiments and only hold to those activities, independent of what they are, relationship, organization, how you work. My preference is to do online business, so that my walk to my office is from my bedroom down the hall to here, to this room. And that is my daily commute. And I think that's okay.
Okay.
And so everything has to be outcome oriented for me.
Awesome. So enzymes with and between each meal.
Mm-hmm.
Can we just clarify what it means to take an enzyme with a meal and between a meal? Is with before the first bite, on top of the food,
it really
after?
makes no difference.
Okay.
I mean, if you have gastronomical, intestinal sorts of abrasions or some kind of leak, then what I'd recommend, or ulcers, I'd recommend taking the enzymes out of the capsule and mixing them up like in water. They're tasteless.
Right.
In fact, we give them to the grandkids and kids, and we just dump them in stuff and
Okay.
hide it in food. They'll never know.
Right.
And so if you have an ulcer, for example, and you dump enzymes on top of it, it may start working on the ulcer and make the ulcer worse. So if you mix it, disperse it in water and then drink it, it'll flow across a larger surface area faster.
Okay.
And usually it'll have no negative effect.
And so if you have an ulcer, you might then also eat food first and then the enzyme. Would that make a difference?
Yeah,
Okay.
and or mix the enzymes in with the food, or
Right.
just shake. I mean, what we do a lot of times, we'll take the enzymes, just open the caps, and just sprinkle them on our food, or
Right.
put them in salad dressing. Now, keep in mind, if you do that, if you put like enzymes in Chocolate Bliss or salad dressing or some kind of Fiesta Mole soup or something, within a few minutes, those enzymes are going to begin changing the components in the material.
So it may change the taste?
It'll change the taste dramatically. So if you're going to use enzymes inside a recipe, make sure that the whole recipe is going to be consumed very soon. Or you do experiments and figure out how the taste alters over a certain number of hours. And what you'll find is usually there'll be like maybe a 3 to 6 hour period that once the taste changes, it'll be set. And there'll be no other changes.
Right. And you might actually enjoy it.
You might enjoy it.
Right.
It's an experiment.
Between meals, is there a timeline, like after 15 minutes after you've eaten?
Well, it's really interesting because my meals are only one in the middle of the afternoon. So for me, in between meals is, sometime in the morning I might have one, sometime in the evening I might have one. If a person's eaten, for example, 3 meals a day, then between meals means that if you eat at noon and 6, then 3 o'clock.
Okay. So as evenly spaced as
evenly
you
spaced.
manage. Okay, great.
Cool.
And these are suggestions that you made to help unload stress on your pancreas. So one is to take enzymes. Second is to use easy to digest foods. So superfoods would fall in that category.
Yeah, pre-digested foods.
So I'm imagining that means blending foods as much as possible.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, diabetic challenges really are pancreatic exhaustion. That's why the question about pancreas. How do you unload the activity a pancreas is doing so that it can begin to regenerate itself and reboot immunity, because pancreas and spleen are the hearts of immunity. And if they're offline, it's bad news.
Yeah.
So enzymes with cooked foods, if it's highly processed or animal foods, especially fatty animal foods, you're going to require a bunch more enzymes because those are like toxic sludge.
Right.
And if you're, drinking or eating chicken embryos, for example, little egg things, if you take an egg and crack it on the sidewalk and leave it overnight, you have to have a ball peen hammer to get it off the sidewalk. You can test it yourself.
And
that's
that
how
would be what's on your intestines.
Yeah, that's what's in your intestines.
Right.
So, if that works for you, that's great. If you find you're having some challenges, you might try as an experiment to leave out all animal products for a while and see how that. I mean, it's been. I just know how many years. The last animal product I had was salmon, which I had for the last 7 years. That was the only animal product in my transition. So after 5 years, I'd transitioned off all animal flesh and anything that came from eyes or had eyes. Simple rule of thumb, except salmon, and that took another 7 years because there's a specific frequency of fats and amino acids to salmon. And once I figured out I could get it from algae, which the salmon eat, I was off it in 3 days.
Awesome. And would you
So.
suggest increasing things like algae or other greens as a way of helping to unload the stress on the pancreas?
Yes, that's another. So anything that's really, really dense nutrition, high nutrition, low caloric, and also low processing.
Right.
So things like cacao that's fully fermented requires much less processing than cacao that's more green.
And processing meaning like the digestive processing,
yeah.
Not like a manufacturing
Yeah,
processing.
yeah. So pancreatic involvement.
Right.
So things like algae, enzymes, especially if you're eating, like I said, cooked animal processed. Yeah.
And you also mentioned that so no processed foods, so no externally processed foods like the packaged wheat, egg, milk stuff.
Yeah, I mean the rule of thumb is the more processed, the more you're going to have to deal with, which is also like nutritional panels. Nutritional panels are really their toxicology panels, and what they tell you is if you are so foolish to put this thing in your mouth, this is the junk you're going to have to detox. A tomato has no nutritional panel. A avocado or a hunk of lettuce. Food has no real food has no nutritional panel. So I get this question like, well, and we will have nutritional panels soon, and they'll be meaningless. Because our superfoods are food, as are all superfoods, not just our brand.
Right.
But so if you have a question about nutritional panels or how much calories something has in it, that's just an indication you're starving to death because you're eating too much food and you have too much caloric intake. And if you're concerned with nutritional panels, that means you're foolishly eating things with nutritional panels on it.
So, but the tomato that doesn't have a nutritional panel. Can't you look up and find out, how much, like you would know how much of that is a sugar and how much is a protein, how much is a fat?
There's no legal requirement though. For example, coconuts have a high level of sugar of a specific type. If a diabetic drinks coconut water, they'll have no effect.
Because it's recognized as food and it's not processed
it's a whole
sugar.
food, yeah.
Okay.
If a diabetic goes and, for example, cooks that coconut water or adds sugar to it and drinks it, then they got a problem. So that's what those nutritional panels are actually. You can think of them as Surgeon General warnings that if you eat this, you're going to have to deal with the consequences. So if you've got a question about nutritional panels, here's the answer: avoid anything with one on it.
So this is great because one of the questions that we get a lot that a lot of diabetics are trained in is they're counting carbs because the number of carbs tells them. And specifically the breakdown of the kind of carbs tells them how much insulin do I need because this is the number of carbs I've taken and how much short-term insulin and how much long-term insulin.
Yep. How much time release.
If you're not using a nutritional panel and you don't know the number of carbs, how do you measure that?
Oh, that's easy. You check your blood sugar level before and after.
Okay.
And you got to be really careful because if you start using high-quality enzymes, whether they're ours or somebody else's, if you are so lucky as to be able to have some way to import Japanese enzymes, you can get close to the strength of enzymes that we have. So if you got high quality enzymes, bring me back on track. I kind of go.
How much insulin do they take because they're not counting carbs?
So if you've got an enzyme you're working with or some other type of food that is affecting your blood sugar, balancing it, you have to be really careful because the question will no longer be how much insulin. The question will be if I take the same amount of insulin, I may end up in a coma.
Right.
Because what we've seen is even type 1 diabetics, I used to think there was a big difference between type 1 and 2. I think there's much less difference than most people make out to be because every single type 1 diabetic that's come to us has been able to turn around their diabetes, which is supposedly impossible, in the same amount of time as type 2.
Wow.
The longest person that we ever had to take turnaround was a type 2 diabetic that had been injecting insulin for 20 years, and it took them 2 weeks. Most people takes 2 or 3 days.
And just from following this program of the water, the Chocolate Bliss, the enzymes,
water and
no processed foods.
And I'll expand a little on Chocolate Bliss. Rather than saying Chocolate Bliss, what I would say is high water content, high nutrition fluids.
Okay.
It might be something like Chocolate Bliss. It might be something as simple as taking a bunch of produce and putting it in a juicer.
Like a Butanco style green smoothie,
Yeah,
or
juice. Making your own V8 at home, you know.
Or a Fiesta Mole soup.
Or Fiesta Mole soup,
Right.
anything like that that's really dense nutrition that requires very little processing.
Okay.
And again, you
raw.
got to be, and raw.
Right.
And you have to be extremely careful, because what we've seen, especially type 1 diabetics, is the farther your sugar is, like if you've got a sugar over here at 300, usually people that walk in the door, that we'll have them come in and test their blood sugar, and then we'll give them a big tall glass of water they have to drink,
Right.
and then an enzyme and a big tall glass of Chocolate Bliss, which has got a bunch of agave nectar in it, right? Completely counterintuitive to all the myths that agave nectar is evil, and that agave nectar is bad for diabetics.
Well, your agave is different.
It is.
Right.
And which you can prove yourself. All you have to do is taste it and use it and do your own experiments. Don't believe anybody. Don't believe me. Just try it yourself.
Don't believe me either. I've been drinking this vanilla agave nectar for over a year and a half, and no side effects whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if the higher the blood sugar, the faster it normalizes. And so usually the people that are like in the 300 plus realm, which is way too high, they'll usually see like maybe over an hour time a 5 to 10% drop in blood sugar.
Okay.
So if you've got so in 1 hour, if you've got a 5 to 10% drop in blood sugar, and you keep doing that, think about every hour dropping 5 to 10%. How many hours does it take to get down to a point where if you take your normal insulin dose, now you're in a hospital in a coma trying to get over the insulin you took.
So better to test.
So just test. Don't be counting. Well, I mean, you can if you like. It's useless information though with superfoods. Better to test, do a little intake a little bit, and then test again. And based on that, then you figure out what your next test is.